you're fishing peacefully at your neighborhood lake, until an HOA board member storms over, slaps you with a $500 fine, and smugly warns you to follow the rules. But here's the twist. I didn't just pay the fine. I bought the entire lake out from under them, banned the HOA from setting foot on it, and turned their power trip into a national news story. This is the most savage revenge ever taken on a homeowners association, and by the end of this video, you'll see exactly how I pulled it off. Let's rewind a bit. My neighborhood has always boasted this gorgeous, serene lake, tucked right behind a row of homes, surrounded by trees, and for years, it was our little haven. People fished there, walked their dogs, had quiet picnics, no drama, no red tape. It was one of the few things that made living under the HOA even remotely tolerable. But of course, the peace didn't last. One day, out of the blue, the HOA rolled out a new policy. Fishing was now off limits unless you purchased a special annual fishing permit for $200. No meeting, no vote, just an email announcement like they were royalty handing down a decree. And it gets better. If you dared to fish without paying up, they'd hit you with a $500 fine per incident. At first, I thought it was just another empty threat. I mean, who charges neighbors for using a lake we've always had access to? But I was wrong. A week later, I found a bright orange envelope stuck to my front door. Inside was a notice from the HOA. I'd been fined $500 for unauthorized recreational use of HOA-managed property. That's when it all clicked. This wasn't about permits. It was about squeezing money out of us for something that had always been free. And that fine? That was just the beginning of a battle they never expected. It was just after dawn, and the world was quiet. I stood at the edge of the lake with a steaming cup of coffee beside me, casting my line into the still water like I had so many times before. This was my routine, my peace before the chaos of the day. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, I heard the unmistakable whine of a golf cart engine. I turned around and saw him, one of the more obnoxious HOA board members, barreling toward me like I'd committed a felony. He stopped just feet away and started yelling that I was breaking the rules. I asked him what rule, exactly, I was violating. He shouted something about the new fishing permit requirement, and claimed I was trespassing on HOA-managed property without permission. I tried to reason with him. I told him it's a lake, not a parking lot. I wasn't polluting, wasn't littering, wasn't disturbing anyone. I was literally just fishing at dawn in a place I'd enjoyed for years. But none of it mattered. He wasn't there to listen, he was there to flex HOA power. A week later, sure enough, I got the dreaded envelope in the mail, a $500 fine for unauthorized lake use. I couldn't believe it. I showed up at the next HOA meeting to appeal, thinking I could explain and get this ridiculous fine reversed. But the moment I brought it up, they laughed. Not just a smirk, actual laughter, like my situation was some neighborhood joke. That's when I realized they weren't just enforcing rules, they were enjoying the power trip. And that was the moment I decided, they messed with the wrong fisherman. That's when everything changed. After the humiliation at the HOA meeting and that ridiculous $500 fine for simply fishing at the same lake I'd used for years, I started digging. I wasn't just angry, I was curious. How could they fine me for something that never used to be a problem? So I started looking into the lake's history, checking county records, land documents, anything I could find online. And what I found completely blew my mind. The HOA didn't even own the lake. They had been leasing it for years under some vague agreement, and now that lease was quietly expiring. Even better? The actual landowner had just listed the lake for sale, publicly, right there on a small local real estate website. That's when this idea popped into my head. Crazy. Insane. But oddly possible. I picked up the phone and called the listing agent. She was polite, professional, and curious why I was asking so many detailed questions about the property line and usage rights. Then I just asked the question straight up. What if I buy it and make the rules? There was a long pause. Then she said, well, technically, yes. If you own it, it's your land. You'd have full control. That was all I needed to hear. But I wasn't naive. I knew I couldn't just walk in, drop a check, and throw HOA board members out overnight. No, if I was going to do this, I needed a strategy. I needed leverage. So I spent the next few weeks preparing. I met with a real estate attorney and explained the situation in full. He was just as stunned as I was that the HOA had been bluffing ownership for years. He looked through the documents and confirmed it. If I purchased the property, the HOA would have zero say. They couldn't find me. They couldn't patrol it. They couldn't even step foot on it without my permission. But here's the thing, the lake wasn't cheap. It wasn't millions of dollars, but it was enough to make me pause. I wasn't rich, but I did have some investments, savings, and a family business I could borrow against. So I had a decision to make, either let the HOA win, or go all in and take back control in the most epic way possible. And I chose the latter. But before I pulled the trigger, I wanted one last piece of leverage. I started quietly attending HOA meetings, sitting in the back, listening. I watched as they rolled out more ridiculous rules, fees for kayak storage, restrictions on who could walk near the lake trail, even talks about installing a members-only gate. The neighborhood was growing frustrated. People were angry, especially the older residents who had enjoyed the lake for decades. That's when I knew I wasn't alone. The HOA was losing goodwill fast, and I had something they didn't, a plan that would hit them right where it hurt. So while they were out here trying to squeeze money out of innocent residents with fake permits and power trips, I was preparing to own the very thing they were pretending to control. And once I did, I was going to flip the entire dynamic upside down. I was done playing games. After weeks of research, legal consultations, and watching the HOA dig their own grave with petty rules and outrageous fines, I was ready to make my move. I called the realtor back and made a simple but firm offer, full asking price, cash, with one very specific condition written into the sale. The HOA would have zero future claim, influence, or authority over the lake. I wasn't about to spend a dime if there was even a chance they could try to worm their way back in. The seller, to my surprise, loved it. In fact, once I explained what the HOA had been doing, pretending to own the lake, fining people for fishing, issuing fake permits, he practically begged me to go through with it. They'd been a pain to deal with for years, he told me. Honestly, I'd love to see them knock down a peg. That sealed the deal. Within days, the paperwork was signed, notarized, and filed with the county. The lake was mine, every square inch of it. And I didn't waste a second. The very day the ink dried, I drafted a letter to the HOA board. It was short, professional, and sharp. No threats, no emotion, just facts. As of date, I am the legal and sole owner of the lake located within the neighborhood name boundaries. Effective immediately, all HOA-issued permits, fines, and restrictions related to this lake are null and void. The HOA has no jurisdiction over the property. Use of the lake by any HOA representatives or residents is now considered trespassing under state law. Then, just to really drive it home, I added one final line. Fishing permits? Cancelled. The lake is now my private property, and you're all banned. I signed it, made 5 copies, and hand-delivered them to each board member's mailbox. And yeah, I might have watched from my porch as they read them. The looks on their faces? Priceless. But I wasn't done. The next morning, I put up custom signs all around the lake's perimeter. They were big, clear, and legal. Private property, no trespassing, no fishing, no HOA access. I even hired a security company to install motion-activated cameras along the most common trails. It wasn't about intimidation, it was about setting a boundary they couldn't ignore. And just as I predicted, the neighborhood exploded. Within 24 hours, the HOA's group chat was flooded with angry residents demanding answers. People wanted to know why they were suddenly banned from a lake they'd used for years. Why their $200 fishing permits meant nothing. Why security cameras were now watching the trail they used for evening walks. The board scrambled. They tried calling me. I didn't answer. They sent a formal request for dialogue, I responded with a copy of the deed and a single sentence. All inquiries must go through my attorney. That's when the reality sank in. The HOA, the same people who fined me for fishing, were completely powerless. They couldn't undo it. They couldn't fight it. They had no legal leg to stand on. And to make it even sweeter, I heard through the grapevine that some of them were facing pressure to resign. One board member apparently lost it during a meeting and stormed out after a shouting match about how this never would have happened if we just left people alone. Meanwhile, I kept fishing. Every morning. Alone. No fines. No harassment. Just me, the water, and the knowledge that I'd done something most people only dream about. I didn't just beat the HOA. I bought the battlefield and kicked them off it. The moment the HOA realized they had no control over the lake anymore, they completely lost it. Within a week of receiving my letter and seeing those "No HOA access" signs, they sent me a cease and desist. It was full of hollow legal jargon, accusing me of disrupting community harmony and unlawfully restricting resident amenities. Nice try. My lawyer took one look at it, laughed, and responded with a single-page letter stating the facts. I owned the property outright, their lease was expired, and their so-called amenity was never legally theirs to begin with. They had no legal standing, and any further contact would be considered harassment. That shut them up pretty quickly, or so I thought. Because what they did next was pure desperation. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and told the neighborhood I was stealing access to a communal resource. They even floated the idea of a lawsuit, trying to rile people up and paint me as the villain. But instead of turning the neighborhood against me, it backfired, big time. Turns out, people were thrilled someone had finally stood up to the HOA. Word spread fast. Neighbors started reaching out, asking what really happened. I told them the truth. The HOA didn't own the lake, never had, and they were fining people illegally. I hadn't stolen anything, I'd bought it legally and protected it from further abuse. And then something wild happened, the local news got wind of it. One evening I got a call from a reporter who'd heard rumors of a David versus Goliath battle in our sleepy little neighborhood. I gave a short interview, just laying out the facts, and by the next day, the story was everywhere. The headline? Homeowner gets ultimate revenge on HOA by buying lake and banning them. That was it. The video clip of me standing beside the "No HOA access" sign, smiling with my fishing pole in hand, went viral. People online were cheering. Other HOA haters from around the country were flooding the comments with stories of their own HOA nightmares. I had unintentionally become a local legend. And as for the lawsuit threats? Completely baseless. My lawyer shut them down at every turn. The HOA had no rights to the land, no easement, no written access agreement. Legally, I was bulletproof, and they knew it. Eventually, even their own attorney must have told them the same, because they went silent. No more emails. No more letters. Just quiet defeat. That's when I decided to do something a little unexpected. I printed flyers and passed them around the neighborhood. Community Fishing Day, Saturday, 7 a.m., all residents welcome. No permits. No fees. Just bring your own bait. People were confused at first, but once they realized I was serious, the excitement was unreal. That Saturday, dozens of neighbors showed up, fathers and sons, retirees, even a few teens who'd never been fishing before. We laughed, shared snacks, told stories, and not a single HOA board member was allowed past the gates. I made it clear, everyone was welcome to enjoy the lake again, except the ones who tried to control it for their own egos. The same people who fined, bullied, and humiliated others for years were now the only ones left standing outside the fence. They could hear the laughter, see the fishing lines in the water, and smell the barbecue smoke drifting through the trees, but they weren't invited. And that was the best part. Because I didn't just get revenge. I gave the neighborhood back something real, freedom from fear. A place to breathe again. And every time I cast my line into that quiet water, I remember the look on their faces, and I smile. Moral of the story? It's simple: don't bully homeowners with petty rules and power trips, because you never know who you're messing with. What started as a peaceful morning of fishing turned into a full-blown neighborhood saga, all because a few HOA board members let authority go to their heads. They thought they could intimidate me, slap on fines, laugh in my face, and just get away with it. But they forgot one key thing: not everyone rolls over when told to. Some of us push back. And in this case, I didn't just push, I bought the very thing they were using to control others. I turned the tables so hard they're still spinning, and now, every resident in that neighborhood knows exactly what happens when you stand up to abuse of power. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about principle. See, when people are put in charge of something, especially in tight-knit communities, they're supposed to look out for everyone's best interests. But far too often, HOA boards turn into little dictatorships, full of folks who love rules more than reason. Instead of being helpful, they become gatekeepers, deciding who gets to enjoy what, when, and how. They'll fine you for planting the wrong color flowers, hanging holiday lights too early, or, like me, fishing in a lake you've used peacefully for years. It's exhausting, frustrating, and sadly, way too common. But this story proves something: their control only works until someone decides to challenge it. And if that person is determined enough, they might just rewrite the rules completely. What happened in my neighborhood made people rethink everything. Suddenly, residents were questioning the board, attending meetings, asking about where their dues were really going. The power shift was real. People felt seen. They felt like maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to accept every ridiculous decision handed down from on high. And the funniest part? The HOA couldn't do anything about it. All their noise, all their threats, all their grandstanding, gone. Silenced. Replaced by the sound of fishing lines zipping through the air and kids laughing by the water's edge. The community found its voice again, not through conflict, but through one bold move, and a whole lot of quiet satisfaction. So let this be a lesson, not just to HOAs, but to anyone who uses rules to control rather than to protect. Respect goes both ways. You can't treat people like they're beneath you and expect loyalty or obedience forever. Sooner or later, someone's going to say, enough, and if they're resourceful, maybe even a little bit petty in the best way possible, they'll change the game entirely. I didn't set out to be the guy who bought a lake just to ban an HOA. But if that's how people remember me, I'll take it. Because at the end of the day, I didn't just win back my right to fish, I made sure no one else would be bullied the way I was. And if you love this story and want more jaw-dropping HOA drama, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and drop your own worst HOA horror stories in the comments below. I read them all, and who knows, your tale might just be the next one we feature here. Until next time, stay bold, stay free, and never let the neighborhood bullies win.